Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. We are just kind of gathering. There's people still coming in the waiting room, so let things get started slowly. A good crowd of you all. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. This is the last workshop in this series where we've had a weekly workshop every Friday. We're going to have a new series in 2 weeks, the 24th, 25th, or 23rd through the 26th. We are going to have state poets, poet laureates. So Tuesday of that week at this same time, 12:30, we're going to have the Nebraska state poet, who I hear is okay. And then on Tuesday, we're going to have Christine Stewart, the South Dakota state poet, and then followed by Kansas and Iowa. So all of this will be June 23rd through 26th. We'll have some stuff on Facebook early next week, and I'll send an email to everybody who's here. You will not be spammed mercilessly, but if you're interested in this, hopefully you'll be interested in the other series. And then in July, Gina Keplinger, who's also along the side somewhere or down there or whatever it is on your screen, Gina will be putting her own series together for July. So, you know, while we're at home, let's write some poetry and use this Zoom thing. So today, I'm very excited to have the poet, poet, fiction writer, raconteur, everything, J.V. Brummels. He has taught at Wayne State College for a good long time, started a press, did so much work with literary magazines and all, and poetry slams, helping bring Poetry Slam to the state of Nebraska. You may not know, he and Lisa Sandlin, basically, I think were the first people I know of who ran a poetry slam at Wayne State College, and it still runs to this day, once every semester. So he has been a supporter of young writers, a supporter of writers in general, as well as a fantastic writer himself. But when I moved back to Nebraska with a master's degree sometime in the 90s, Jim was one of the first folks who kind of took me under his wing, invited me to talk to a class at Wayne, and I didn't screw up too bad. So he's encouraged me for years, and I'm greatly appreciate it. And I am looking forward to this workshop. So with that, J.V. Brummels.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Twyla. Hey, everybody. Thanks, Matt, and thanks to the collective for having me here. I really do appreciate it. I was happy to say yes. I only realized in the intervening weeks how terrified I was going to be talking to a computer and not have real people there. I caught the last two workshops, Kwame Dawes and KDFS, and I thought, well, I'll learn something from them, and I certainly did. And I took notes, and I really appreciated everything that they were doing. I thought they did a great job. This week I've been taking some notes about what I'd want to say, and I was feeling pretty good about everything until about 8 o'clock this morning when I realized I probably only got about 5 minutes worth of stuff to say. So I'll stretch this the best I can. Thanks for everybody for signing up for this. These are terrible times. I mean, it's tough. There's cruelty. There's injustice. There's a pandemic. There's all these things going on. It's just really, I think, very tough for an awful lot of people. I feel it's tough on me, but I know that a lot of people are suffering a good deal worse than I am. I do believe that poetry, and I do believe that arts generally can help us find ways to deal with times like this, a scary world. I'm also the most technologically challenged person you're likely to meet, so I'll be working off some notes, and I'm going to keep this as simple as I can. If you want to say something, you'll probably have to unmute and just yell. for me to notice, I think. I'll try to keep my eye on the chat bar over there, and maybe I can pick something up there too and respond if you want me to. I've thought and written thought about and written and taught about poetry for a long time, written poetry for a long time. I believe there are two primary dynamics that dictate the character of the poem. It's real simple. It's voice and vision. Vision's a poet's way of seeing the past, the present, the future, the world, the cosmos, everything. The influences on a poet's vision don't really come from poetry, whether a workshop like this or reading or hearing other poets so much. I mean, you know, certainly you can read a poem and it can expand your vision, but most of what makes our vision is where we've been born, how we've been raised, the people we run into, all those influences. It's essentially just nature and nurture. You know, vision forms for each one of us what it is we want to be, I think. And that vision is one of the two primary elements for the expression of our being. All right. Now, even if I thought that somehow vision was teachable, I can't imagine presuming that I should try to teach vision. They change, or our visions change over time and through experience, but each vision is personal and sacrosanct. Your poem recounts some part of the world you see as you see it that moment. Your vision, truly rendered, makes it your poem. Voice, I think, is different. If vision is the thing, voice is the way the poet says a thing. Ideally, that voice will ring in the ear of the listener or the inner ear of the reader. Voice generally evolves more dramatically than vision. Our early poems often sound very much like those poets we admire. Over time, the voices of other poets inflect our work. Ideally, finally, those influences disappear into a distinct, maybe unique voice that is the poet's own. So voice is what I want to talk about today. I'll begin with 4 poems, none of them particularly contemporary, but nothing ancient. What I want to demonstrate is that each has a different and obvious voice. The first is a short poem by Chicago poet Gwendolyn Brooks. It's simple and formal in its construction, though it's colloquial. Sadie and Maud. Maud went to college, Sadie stayed at home. Sadie scraped life with a fine-tooth comb. She didn't leave a tangle in, her comb found every strand. Sadie was one of the livingest chits in all the land. Sadie bore 2 babies under her maiden name. Maud and Ma and Papa nearly died of shame. When Sadie said her last so long, her girls struck out from home. Sadie had left as heritage her fine-tooth comb. Maud, who went to college, is a thin brown mouse. She's living all alone in this old house. Like I say, there's not too much, I think, to say about the poem. It explains itself pretty well. 4-line stanzas, A, B, C, B rhyme scheme. I generally don't worry that much about what a poem really says. I want to hear the music of that language. And here the vision's about as straightforward as the form. There's 2 sisters, and as it turns out, the more virtuous of the 2 sisters may have made the poorer choice. All right. Here's a Lawrence Ferlinghetti poem, and I don't know how much you all know about him, but Ferlinghetti was at the center of the Beat movement in San Francisco. If you know anything about the Beats, this might sound familiar, or maybe even a caricature of the Beats, like kind of coffee house finger snapping. It's called Sometime During Eternity. Sometime during eternity, some guys show up, and one of them who shows up real late is a kind of carpenter from some square-type place like Galilee, and he starts wailing and claiming he is hip to who made heaven and earth, and that the cat who really laid it on us is his dad. And moreover, he adds, it's all writ down on some scroll-type parchments which some henchmen leave lying around the Dead Sea somewhere a long time ago, and which you won't even find for a couple of thousand years ago, or at least for 1947 of them, to be exact. And even then, nobody really believes them, or me for that matter. You're hot, they tell him, and they cool him. They stretch him on the tree to cool. And everybody after that is always making models of his tree with him hung up and always crooning his name and calling him to come down and sit in on their combo as if he is the king cat who's got to blow or they can't quite make it. Only he don't come down from his tree. Him just hang there on his tree looking real petered out and real cool, and also according to a roundup of the late world's news from the usual unreliable sources, real dead. Ferlinghetti's about 101. He's still alive, folks. I think he is. Maybe some. Good. I'd hate to be corrected on that one. Just turned 100, I think, last year. And Ferlinghetti, I've always got a warm spot in my heart for him because of his involvement in publishing Allen Ginsberg's Howl and the subsequent censorship trial that came after that. And without Lawrence Ferlinghetti, married couples in movies would still be sleeping in twin beds, and there wouldn't be porn, and you couldn't say fuck. And since the word I like to use some, I'm grateful for that. All right, the voice is real distinct, and the vision's plain, I think. And I don't know there's much more to say about it, except, again, I sort of feel like I should be snapping my fingers when I read it. All right, third poem is from David Lee. He's a poet from Texas and Utah. I've long been a fan of his for the way he has claimed the kind of language for poetry. Rural, profane, funny, tragic. His early career was built on poems that feature pigs. I mean, the vision is hogs, and I can take or leave hogs. Actually, I've had some experience with hogs, and my curiosity is totally satisfied. What draws me is the music in the poem, the voice in the poem. Lee's poems generally have, these early ones have three characters: Dave, who's a guy who's kind of like the author of the poem, his wife Jan, and their neighbor John Sims. Let's try this. It's called Race Hogs. John calls and says, Dave, when I say hello, and I say, hello, John. He says, come down, Dave. You got to see what I got. I say, fine, I'll be right there. And he says, bring Jan. I'll show her too. And I said, I will. So Jan and I got in the car to see what John bought. John bought 4 hogs, starved half to death, bones out everywhere, snout sharp enough to root pine trees, and the longest damn legs I've seen. What do you think? He says, and I don't say anything. So he says, I says, what do you think? And I say, them's pretty good looking race hogs, John. He says, what? And I tell him I heard about a place in Japan or California, because he's never been there, where they have a track and race hogs on Tuesday nights. And he says, do they pay much? And I say, yes, or so I heard, maybe 100 to win. And he says, God damn. And I say, those hogs ought to be good with them long legs and skinny bodies. And he says, God damn. Jan's walked off, so I go find her, but she's mad and says I ought not to do that. And I always say, oh, I was just bullshitting. But when we come back, John's standing by the fence, throwing little pieces of feed all around the pen, making the hogs hurry from one place to the next. And when I get up close, he's smiling, and I can hear him whisper while he throws the feed, run, you skinny fuckers, run.
I love that poem.
I think that's a lovely poem, yeah.
Love it.
Lovely. Anyway, yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about that poem. It's just what the poem is. But that voice in there, when I first read these, that's a revelation to me. The subject, to some degree, the sort of coarseness with which the poem is told, but that free-flowing style that he worked out early on was wonderfully impressive to me, and I think that's informed my poetry too. Now, the last poem I'll read to you this morning is from Philip Levine, and he's a Detroit poet, was a Detroit poet, and it's called They Feed, They Lion. Out of burlap sacks, out of bearing butter, out of black bean and wet slate bread, out of the acids of rage and the candor of tar, out of creosote, gasoline, drive shafts, wooden dollies, they lie and grow. Out of the gray hills of industrial barns, out of rain, out of bus ride West Virginia to kiss my ass, out of buried aunties, mothers hardening like pounded stumps, out of the bones need to sharpen and the muscles need to stretch, they lie and grow. Earth is eating trees, fence posts, gutted cars. Earth is calling her little ones, come home, come home. From pig balls, from the ferocity of pig driven to holiness, from the furred ear and the full jowl come the repose of the hung belly. From the purpose, they lie and grow. From the sweet glues of the trotters come the sweet kinks of the fist. From the full flowers of the hams, the thorax of caves. From bow down come rise up. Come, they lie, and from the reeds of shovels, the grained arm that pulls the hands, they lie and grow. From my 5 arms and all my hands, from all my white sins forgiven, they feed. From my car passing under the stars, they lie. And from my children inherit, from the oak turned to a wall, they lie. And from they sack and they belly open at all that was hidden burning on the oil-stained earth, they feed, they lion, and he comes. Now, I don't know, you can try to tell me what that poem's about. I've never really heard a particularly good explanation. I heard one explanation once that surprised me. But I just think the fragmentary, those fragmentary images sort of build and keep building in a way that provides real power to this poem. Like I say, anybody want to volunteer an explication of the poem? The screen's all yours. All right, I'll give you the one I have heard. I heard it read at Wayne State College once, and a visiting poet, a guy named Bill Matthews, and I loved this poem forever, said that, well, he just loved music, pretty much what I'm saying. That's the way I felt about it. And that he had no idea what it meant. All he knew was that Philip Levine was from Detroit. He was a working class poet. And sophomore said, oh, it's about the Detroit Lions. And I think there is the football team, and I think there is some truth to that. All right. So what I want to work with is voice, like I said, and I'm going to give you a subject to do basically some free writing with for a few minutes, if you would. And it's an arbitrary choice. I've spent a lot of my life around horses and cows. I spent yesterday around horses and cows. And just because horses have the largest eye of any land animal, I think I want you to do something, just write about horses. Everybody's seen horses, you've maybe been around them, you've maybe ridden horses, seen them on a movie screen. I don't care if it's you can do an experience, actual experience of yours, if you would, to describe this horse. You can address mythic horses. There are the sort of metaphoric uses of horses as well. The one example I'd throw out is sawhorse. There are others, but I don't want to, get in everybody's head by saying too many of those. Try to maintain a specific perspective on that horse. Don't worry about line breaks or anything, but start a new pair. If you shift perspectives, try to just start a new stanza or a new paragraph, something like that. Does that make sense? Should I go on about that? I'm going to shut up then. I'll let you 5 minutes if that works.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Well, of course, I didn't bother to look at a clock when I said 5 minutes, because I'm that disorganized, that anxious. Take another minute and then we'll get, or 30 seconds. All right, thanks, guys. Yeah, fine. Just put a stop to it someplace in there. I'll babble for a second and let you finish up if you need to be finishing up a line or a sentence or finding the right word. All right. Okay, we've got a raw material. There's got a couple more steps I want to run you through here. And the next steps have to do not with creating your own voice. I mean, your voice is your voice. You've got it now, or you'll get there over time, and there'll be a lot of influences. But I want to provide a way, or a couple ways, I think, of some things you can put in your repertoire. Now, I'm a big fan of a pretty staccato rhythm. I like stressed syllables. I don't want to say I was going. I want to say I go. I think when you get those stressed syllables, well, there's a drum beat to that. And if that drum beat is solid enough, it'll provide energy, and that will carry the reader through, I think. So what I want you to do now for the next 5 minutes is just get rid of every verb, every form of to be. No was, no am, no is, no are, no were, no will be. It's partly rhythm, and it's also partly a matter of just getting active verbs. So just replace those if you would. And yeah, thank you. I'll give you a call in 4 to let you know. Notice. All right, another minute or so. All right, thanks. That's, well, I'll just babble for another minute or two. I'm a free verse poet. I suspect most of you are free verse poets. I like free verse poet. I'm an American poet, and free verse is free, which seems to fit. I mean, there's some beautiful formal poems in the world. But when people were writing in form, I'm talking about iambs and dactyls, that sort of thing that we don't really study anymore, the poetic foot, and I don't think we need to study it anymore. But they did provide a rhythm that now we don't have that rhythm dictated to us. And so we've got to find that on our own. But what we lost, I think, when we gained a lot by not being formalist poets, but we did lose that form that dictated rhythm. So we sometimes find it difficult to find a rhythm in our language, in our poetry, that keeps a beat and keeps, and therefore can keep people's attention. Next thing I'd like you to do for 4 minutes or so, to be arbitrary. So I want you all the adverbs out of whatever you wrote. If it's an adverb, I'm suspicious of adjectives, and I don't know that I can, and nobody wants, I assume, I hope that those terms make sense, but I'll tell you, the big thing is if it ends in an ly, lose it, get rid of that. It's an unstressed syllable and it needs to go away. But be real suspicious of your adjectives too, and see if you can trim that down. And yeah, I'll give you a few minutes to do that. I expect mostly you're done and kind of just looking it over. Another 30, 45 seconds, something like that. Yep. Mhm. All right, folks. I guess my first question is there anything left of the poem at this point? I mean, I got a feeling I'm getting you to cut out all the words. Got a blank sheet, a bunch of crossed out stuff. I think the beats, I would assume understand, but just to be real clear about it, it's those stress beats. It's whose woods these are, I think, is, Buffalo Bill's defunct, who used to ride a water smooth silver stallion, that where that emphasis hits. The last thing I'll ask you to do with what you've got is to break it into lines. All right. And I know, I think, I try to base my line breaks on breath or heartbeat or something physical. This is a little artificial, but it may be instructive. Break what you've got into lines, but each line has to have exactly the same number of beats throughout the poem. Thanks, and you can take all the time you need. I'll interrupt you in about 5 minutes. Give you another 30 seconds or so. All right, folks, that's obviously you can finish that exercise any old time. One little tip, I think, is that if you find you've got some long lines in there, it's likely because you've got some really lax lines and some lax wording in those long lines. You might want to take a look at them again. That's what I've got for you today. If anyone makes a comment, wants to make a comment, or if you got a question or something, I'll respond to it. But I've officially made the 45 minutes that Matt said was the minimum on this. And so I'm going to sort of figure my responsibility has been not necessarily well met, but it's been met. So thank you all.
Thanks, JV.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks.
I must say, I must have worked with you before, JV, because my first poem was 4 lines and 12 words. I had nothing to cut out.
Well, Peggy, I remember that. Yes. Glad. I guess that lesson took.
It did. I finally eliminated the. I had the in each line.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. All right. Thanks again, folks.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Matt.
Sure. It's my pleasure. Glad to put this on. Again, we'll be doing more. Watch our Facebook. I will send out an email. And if I'll send it to all the participants from the workshops. If you don't want to receive emails on things like this, it would just be for the series in June. And then in July that Gina's putting together, but appreciate having everybody come in. It's better to be in the same room, but it's nice to see poet faces.
It is. Bye, guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.